All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80/20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome 80/20 baseball coaches to our weekly get together. Most of you listeners are located here in the United States, but Canada, got a lot of listeners up in Canada, Australia, France. I was watching that World Cup game. I know some of you aren't into soccer, but I like watching high level sports. World Cup, I've been watching that a lot. And France, what a good team. Some good soccer out there in Europe. You know what I like about soccer? It's 2 hours, game starts, game is played, 2 hours. Baseball needs to figure that out on the higher level. I like 2.5. I'm a big 2.5 hour fan. If you go back and look at when Major League Baseball was considered America's pastime, those games were 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes. They didn't get to 2 hours and 45, 3 hours until recent, not that long ago. So soccer, hey, you got that going for you. Get rid of that offsides rule, at least when the ball's past half, or I should say midfield. I don't like that whole offsides. I don't like the defense running the other way just to catch the offensive guy in a predicament and then get offsides called. You almost reward defenses for being lazy in some cases. But other than that, I have been watching those. Love it. France looking good. It's a lot of different countries. Pretty cool to see. All right, Deion Sanders. I know some of you are like, hey, Coach Bo, this is the youth baseball coaching. I'm trying to tie this all into youth baseball coaching. Deion Sanders, he's a coach out there, right? And he's a coach that seems to resonate well with his players. He's taking the job at University of Colorado for football. My brother-in-law, David's over there teaching. And so he's fired up, and that's pretty cool. And I'm hopefully we're over there seeing him next time there's a game going on and we can get out there. I'd love to see Deion do his thing. Interested to see how that goes. Deion Sanders, interesting coach. I hope it works out. I think what he's bringing to the table as a coach, and for youth coaches or any coach to watch and listen to, I think there's a lot to be used and borrowed from. We'll see how it shakes out. He's a coach. He seems to balance discipline and toughness, that message of discipline, ownership, responsibility with being a player's coach, being somebody that the players like, that they respect. And I think that's the combo you want to have, of course. Aaron Judge, I was bummed. I thought he might be coming out west. That means I get to see him more. I'm a baseball fan, but when they're on the West Coast, obviously we get to see him a little more often on TV, and the time zone lines up a little bit better. Aaron Judge seems like a really great guy. I'm going to talk about Aaron Judge in part 2. I'm going to actually take it. Please be one of 3 examples that we use for the part 1 message today to you coaches. Is something we can do, or I should say something we can learn from when we're coaching our hitters. And speaking of this week, we are going to get in and discuss a key strategy for off-season arm strength and arm health. In part 2, like I said, I'm going to bring up Judge as an example, but it's going to be talking about a baseball version of the prevent defense that you see in football. If you know what I'm talking about, that prevent defense prevents you from winning. I'm going to share with you baseball's version of that in part 2 and how we can avoid coaching like that. I'm going to share some very interesting statistics on that, and we'll get to that in part 2. If you haven't listened to episode 159 last week, 2 specific ways to have a better dugout on game days and a clearer understanding of pitch count recommendations. So go back, check that out. I do apologize if last week's episode seemed a little bit glitchy. It shouldn't have been too much, but I was testing out a new software, working with my editor, Sam, and just trying to make this a better podcast, trying to make it a better product for you. So it's faster, more efficient, it's quality, you're getting a good message. Really try hard to not waste time. I've listened to podcasts for a long time. One thing that's hard is when there's a lot of and you knows and a lot of dead space. And a lot of times I feel on podcasts that I've listened to over the years, the content really only takes up about 20 to 30 minutes, yet the podcast is a 45-minute podcast and there's dead space. There's a lot of going off on long tangents. Now, I do like to deviate sometimes, mix it up, but I make sure that if it does go too far, I cut that off. I go through the editing, I cut that out because I respect your time. Speaking of time, let's get into it. Part 1, a key strategy for off-season arm strength and arm health. So last week we talked about the pitch recommendations. I brought up the idea of pitch recommendations. I didn't make up the idea, but I brought up that concept and that topic, I should say. And I used ASMI as a focal point. ASMI, the American Sports Medical Institute, they're considered really high up there with their recommendations and the respect for the integrity and the science that they're using for the recommendations. So we talked about that last week, and we talked about some of the pros and cons and the cookie cutter approach that inherently apparently are pitch recommendations for the most part. This week, I want to discuss a key strategy for off-season arm strength and arm health, and that is on-ramping. So in LA, there are a couple, in Los Angeles, that is, there are a couple on-ramps that give you about 60 feet of pavement before you're on the 5 freeway going 75 miles, or you should be going 75 miles an hour. Not a lot of cars can do that, right? You got a Maserati, you got a Tesla, those are good to go. But everybody else is coming on to the freeway at best 50, 55, in some cases 40. And that's not grandma driving. That's actually giving it some gas and trying to get going. These on-ramps, these freeway on-ramps are not long enough. They're not long enough for arm care and arm conditioning. We don't want our pitchers and our baseball players in general, all players, we don't want to give them just 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get their arm ready for the season. And definitely, we don't want to wait for those first practices to start getting their arm prepared and in shape. This should be a gradual increase. Over here in Boise, there's an on-ramp on the 84. Actually, it's right by where the new Top Golf is. They just put a Top Golf out here, so I'm fired up to go there. A lot of you know I'm talking about Top Golf. I'm excited to go check that out. They just opened it like 2 weeks ago here in Boise, so that's pretty sweet. In fact, you can see the lights from across the valley. They're pretty bright. But there's an on-ramp right by the Top Golf. There's the 84. It's kind of the main highway coming through Boise there. And that on-ramp, it's probably half a mile long. You have half a mile to get up to speed. And so every car that gets on and merges onto the highway, the interstate at that point, is going a sufficient or a high enough speed where they blend in with traffic and there's not that speed differential, which is one of the biggest problems for accidents, right? And with pitching, and I should say with throwing, with arm care, ramping up too quick is a big deal. Now, throwing technique and just overall strength, and there's a lot of factors, but there's some things that we can really truly control, and that is on-ramping correctly, on-ramping our throwers, our kids' throwing arms, and building those up. Now, ASMI does recommend this. They do recommend, if you didn't go and check, when I recommended last week to go check out asmi.org, they have the recommendations on there. And if you did go and you looked at the fine print, they do recommend that baseball overhand throwers, they recommend take 2 to 3 months off per year with no throwing. Now, there's a lot of back and forth in the baseball community with this. I'm sure there's some kids that throw year round that make it through and never have an injury, but maybe they could have been better. And I'm sure there's some pitchers that definitely should have had some rest. So what the physicians over there at the ASMI are saying is that their research shows that the bulk of players, overhand throwers, should take 2 to 3 months off in a calendar year from throwing. And they recommend 4 months. So that leaves 8 months of throwing. That's a good amount of throwing, right? So hopefully there's time for every kid to have some rest from throwing or throwing of a lesser volume. Hopefully it's not amped up all year. And so the on-ramping is important in 2 specific ways, not just the volume per session, so the throw volume per session, that's one part of it. And then the throw volume per week, per 2 weeks, per month. And that's another part of it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what numbers players should use or not use, because that would be a disservice and that would be the wrong thing, I believe, for me to do. Because all these kids you're working with, all the kids out there are unique in their own ways. And I think one size fits all is definitely not the approach, but there should be some parameters. And one parameter is start lower and build up, start with fewer throws and build up. Kids might want to get out there after they haven't thrown in a while, and they might want to throw 100 throws. They might want to get out there and throw 200 throws. Back off, all right? Lower that number down. I think it's better to err with less, err on the side of caution, err with fewer throws, and then build up. What you can do, and a good way to do this is just to have the player throw and ask them how they feel the next day. How do they feel? Let the arm talk. Alan Yeager is a well-known baseball coach and a well-known kind of consultant. He is the Yeager bands, the J bands. I've talked about those quite a bit on here. But one thing about Alan Yeager that I like is he says, listen to the arm. Listen to the arm. I don't agree with everything that he says. I do love his mental health stuff more than anything, his mental game stuff more than anything. But I don't agree with everything he says when it comes to the physical, the throwing, and the long tossing. But I will say this, he has a great message about listen to the arm. And what I would use and take that, extrapolate from that comment and put it into the on-ramping is go out there, throw some, maybe throw 25, 30 throws, see how it feels. See how it feels the next day. See how it feels later that day, the next day, and then go from there. So listen to the arm, see how it feels. If it doesn't feel bad, if the arm feels good, if your kid's arm feels good or the group feels good, you step it up a little bit more. So incrementally build it up. But this is why you want that long on-ramp. Again, ASMI, who I think think is, in my opinion, good on this recommendation. I think the evidence and the studies they've put together that I've looked through and dissected looks legit. The studies look like they were conducted with efficacy and validity, and I think they were constructed well. So I think the conclusions that they're drawing from that are a good spot for us to start with and use at this point in time in the year 2022. So you take those 2 to 3 months, maybe 4 months of no throwing, and then you on-ramp from there. You start by throwing a certain day, see how it feels. I would start with less and build up from there. You can always add, but you can't take away. That is, you can't take away the pain or even worse, an injury once it occurs. Start early, and if anything, just go out once a week and start throwing. And I think right now is not a bad time to start. And I know different areas start their seasons or their main season, their main spring season at different times. In the warm states, that kicks off heavy like February. Like we're less than 2 months away or 2 months away from some heavy action in those warmer states. So they definitely should have already started. At least they're on-ramping. That doesn't mean full-on crazy 60-pitch bullpen sessions. Of course not. Some of you are in cold weather areas where you don't even start really until April or May. But even then, it doesn't hurt to start looking into throwing a little bit. If you've used up those 2 or 3 months of recovery that the ASMI recommends, start throwing at least once a week. Get out there, 30, 40 throws, see how it feels. Twice a week, 3 times a week, build up. So not just building up the amount of throws per session, but the amount of sessions per week. So keep that in mind. Those are the 2 things that you really want to factor in. And it doesn't hurt to calendar it out. This is what I've done for years and had a lot of success with is I work backwards from the start of the season. I don't work up to the start of the season. I work backwards. And that seems to have worked really well over a lot of years with the hundreds of different pitchers of all different levels. So take out the calendar, look at when your first game is, look at when your first practice is or your first major scrimmage, and then work back from that point. Some of you might need to start throwing, if you haven't been throwing, some of you might need to start having your kids throw twice a week right now, maybe 3 times a week, maybe of lesser volume each day. Some of you don't ramp it up and really kick off until April or May, and that's those really cold weather areas. Then you could probably start doing once a week or maybe even wait till the beginning of January. You can always add a little bit more as you go, but it's hard to add more once the season's 2 weeks away or a month away. So to wrap up this message, I recommend you err on the side of starting early with less volume, and then you can always add from there. Always good to talk about arm health, and I think there's definitely some things that are out of our control. There's going to be things that are out of our control as coaches and even as players, but there are things within our control, and we need to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's with those things, and that we really do our best to maximize the percentage or the odds that our kids' arms stay healthy and strong. Now, I got a quote from one of the funniest managers of all time, Tommy Lasorda, and he said this, quote, "Managing is like holding a dove in your hand. Squeeze it too hard and you kill it. You don't squeeze it hard enough and it flies away." End quote. The late, great Tommy Lasorda. He's like a Yogi Berra type of comedy or personality. Not the same, but similar in a way. And he really said some funny stuff. But I don't think this one is meant to be funny at all. I think this quote is meant to be very helpful. Managing is like holding a dove in your hand. If you squeeze it too hard, you kill it. But if you don't squeeze it hard enough, it flies away. We don't want to put so much pressure on our players. And we don't want to come at them so firm that we lose them. We lose their buy-in. But we also don't want to be all laissez-faire, and definitely we don't want to get to a point where we're not enforcing our rules, our expectations that we've laid forth. Definitely don't want to get there. So you don't want to lose credibility. You don't want to let the kids do whatever they want. Being a child is not about always doing what they want to do, but what they need to do. And that's where we as adults come in and really step in and say, all right, now we definitely want to try to help kids do the things they want to do, but we also are here to guide them down the path of doing the things they need to do, not just in baseball, but in life. So keep this quote in your back pocket or in the back of your mind when you're out there and you're trying to balance out your discipline or your firm tone with showing that you care, showing the players that you genuinely do care about them, because you should. As people, as kids, you care about them more than just a position or more than just a spot in the batting order, or definitely more than just the number on their jersey. You should really really care about that kid and want to build a connection with the kid to get the most out of the kid. But it's about getting that buy-in and build that rapport so then you can get them to rise up to their highest level. And you don't want to squeeze too hard. It's like when I shared out a while back, you don't want to treat your team like you're a zookeeper, and you don't want them to just be an open range, right? You don't want to be like an open range. You want it to be like a wild animal park. Without so much of the wild, but a little bit from time to time is always fun. You want it to be a place where there are fences, but they have room to roam. Not 18 by 18 foot cages, and definitely not this, hey, run wild, wherever. Zero leash, go for it, do whatever. So I think Tommy's quote encapsulates that idea, that paradigm really well. Now, moving into part 2, here's the thing. We all know, those of us that watch football, and even soccer, the other football, that's a funny commercial that Beckham, I think it was Beckham and Peyton Manning, those two, they have a great commercial out there. Many of you probably seen it. I think it's the Doritos. Anyways, great commercial on football and what one is really called or what sport is really football. But nonetheless, so in football, in American football, there's this well-known idea that if you play prevent defense, if you have a lead, you start playing prevent defense, then you really are preventing your own team from winning because you just start giving up yards and the other team actually does score instead of pressuring them, blitzing, sticking with some man zero, some cover zero, bringing some backers, stunting, and not just getting into this vanilla type of defense. From what I've seen, I don't like that prevent. I'm not against it in some cases. I have seen teams that don't play prevent defense and they give up the 80-yard bomb when all they had to do is keep the ball in front of them. But in baseball, if we teach our hitters to go up there with the mindset of trying to prevent a strikeout, they go up there and they believe or they think that we want them to go up there and not strike out, and the goal of the bat is to not strike out. I'm telling you, this is baseball's version of the prevent defense. This mindset is going to prevent hitters from achieving their ultimate or highest level of success. Never want our hitters to go up there trying to prevent a strikeout, not even in a 2-strike count. And we've talked at length. I'm a big fan of putting the ball in play with 2 strikes on those pitches that are hard to hit. They're French pitches, great pitchers pitches, because you don't want to leave it up to the umpire and go down looking. Better to take your chances on a defensive error or a bloop or a foul ball. Next pitch might be a meatball, so on and so forth. The idea of striking out should not be in our hitter's head. In fact, I throw this out there. I think we should get to a point where we don't even talk about strikeouts with our hitters. We talk about an approach, a plan, but it's not about strikeouts. That's a result. We want to talk about the process. It's interesting. I do see a lot of coaches that are well known talking about, we got to focus on the process, work the process. It's all about the process, work the process, be about the process. And then they turn around and all they talk about is with their hitters is not striking out. We can't strike out. Now you can talk about the process and really harp on the process and every once in a while bring up the result. So what I really want you to get out of this part 2 as coaches is really trying to avoid the wording, the message of not striking out, of trying to prevent a strikeout, or the goal is to not strike out. Even with 2 strikes, I don't think that's a good message. The message should be what to do, not the result we're trying to avoid. Now, I like to bring up famous major league players because we know all of them. If I talk about Johnny down the street playing in the league near me, that's a stud, you're all going to be like, Johnny who? What league? Where? I like bringing up these well-known famous players because we all know who they are, or at least most of us do, or we can go look at a lot of video on them and we can see what I'm talking about. Aaron Judge finished last season with what most people consider one of the greatest seasons of all time as a batter, as a hitter. One of the greatest seasons. He was the MVP. He set the American League home run record. But I don't hear a lot of these strikeout naysayers, these coaches out there in the baseball community that hate strikeouts. I don't hear them really talking about the high strikeout total for Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge had 175 strikeouts. That's a huge total if we care about strikeouts and if we're using that as a benchmark of success, which I definitely don't think we should. Of course, I don't want to judge hitters off of how many strikeouts they have. I'm telling you, that is something that we want to avoid. Of course, strikeouts are not good. Of course, they're not the result we want. What I'm saying, we want to make sure that we're looking at this from all the angles and we're looking at this fairly and unbiasedly. And we're not just trying to promote this and, oh, striking out's bad. Striking out's not great, but going up there and trying to avoid strikeouts as the goal, as the focal point of a hitter's plan plan or approach is terrible. It's a terrible idea in my opinion. Aaron Judge had 175 strikeouts. To give you some context, many years over the last 75 years, 100 years of baseball, there have been a ton of years where 175 would have led the league in strikeouts. In fact, there's some years, not even that long ago, that 175 strikeouts would have blown away the next person in line as the most strikeouts for a season. He struck out a lot more than he walked. And in 2017, he was Rookie of the Year. He was Rookie of the Year and he finished second in the MVP voting that year. And he absolutely annihilated the rest of the league in strikeouts. He had 208 strikeouts. 208 strikeouts. He was second in the MVP. He was Rookie of the Year, one of the best rookie seasons of all time. And last year, he had 175 strikeouts, but he batted .311. So he had a massively high strikeout total. He struck out more than once a game. He played 157 games. He had 175 strikeouts. That's quite a bit more than once a game. That's a good chunk more. 175. He had almost 20 more strikeouts than he even had games. Now, before I wrap up my talk on Judge here, Aaron Judge led the league with an astounding 391 bases, total bases, almost 400 total bases, just an incredibly high number. The game of baseball on offense is about bases. It's about you getting as many bases as you can. Bases equal runs. Home plate is 4 bases away. You need a lot of bases to get there. Or moving up players and scoring players, moving your teammates up bases. Bases is the name of the game on offense. I'm a big fan of walks. I'm a big fan of on-base percentage. I'm a big fan of all that, but I'm also a big fan of driving the ball in the gaps. I'm a big fan of hitting doubles, and I'm a big fan of not preaching to our players to avoid strikeouts, the avoidance of strikeouts. I wouldn't even get into strikeouts that much at all. I wouldn't really even talk about it. If you as a coach just talk about a good plan A and a good plan 2 approach that we've broken down, it's over there on the 80-20 baseball. There's an article that outlines it. I've talked about it at length on here. If you just focus on that, nothing in there talks about strikeouts with regard to avoiding them. So Aaron Judge had just a crazy amount of total bases, yet he struck out 175 times. So how's he getting all those bases? As you can see, you can still be a massively productive player and also strike out. In fact, if you go up there and you're trying to avoid strikeouts, you're going to be very low on the productivity scale, in my opinion, for the most part. And that's been proven over time. There's the rare exceptions, but even those players, the Tony Gwynns, the Rod Carews, in my opinion, could have been even more productive when it comes to run production, not necessarily hit totals. In fact, I would have rather seen Tony Gwynn's hit total go down, and I think he would have produced more runs. Not a lot. I'm not saying he should have gone from 3,000 hits, whatnot, in a career to 1,500, but if he would have dropped that down and hit 25 to 2,200 hits, but just tried to drive the ball a little bit more, I think he would have produced more runs for his team. And that's the name of the game. It's about runs, not hits, not walks. Now, a lot of times those go together, but not always do they go together. And if you're trying to aim for hits or just getting walks or not striking out, you're missing the big picture of the hitting approach. And I think this is a good illustration. Aaron Judge, you go, well, that's just Aaron Judge. That's anecdotal. We would all consider Mike Trout one of the best, if not the best hitter on the entire planet. I think we'd all agree on that. In 2014, he led the league in strikeouts. Yes, he led the league in strikeouts. He struck out more than every other hitter. Guess who won the MVP that year? Yep, Mr. Trout. Yes, sir. Led the league in strikeouts. Guess who led the league in total bases that year? Mr. Trout. Well, you say, Coach Bo, what about driving in teammates? Guess who led the major leagues in RBIs? Mr. Trout. So he struck out the most, yet he touched the most bases. He also knocked in the most players, most teammates. So he moved up players when it counted. He moved them up incredibly important bases. He got them to home plate more than anybody. And for those of you that care so much about batting average, he batted about .287, which is a great batting average. At least it's a lot higher than average at that level. So he struck out a ton, but he still had an MVP season, most bases, drove in the most runs. And I'll share a third one with you. Somebody who finished Rookie of the Year 2015 had 199 strikeouts, led the league in strikeouts. He was Rookie of the Year, an all-star, finished 11th in the MVP voting, Chris Bryant. The next year, he had 154 strikeouts. He struck out once a game. He had 154 strikeouts, 155 games. He struck out once a game. Guess who won the MVP in 2016? Mr. Bryant. So what I'm trying to share here is strikeouts are not the enemy. Of course, we're not aiming for them, but I don't think we should talk about avoiding them or getting them. Arguably two of the best hitters on the planet at this very time. I think most people would say Mike Trout, Aaron Judge, number 1 and 2. They strike out a lot. But they produce a ton of runs and they score a ton of runs. So even though these are major league players and we're coaching youth players, I think we can use these examples and draw from them some similarities, some of the same things that we can deduce, some of the same things are going to happen or will happen in youth baseball. And again, I didn't talk about home runs there because those are strong guys and strong players. I just talked about batting average, the runs scored. So I didn't even get into the home runs, which for a 7-8U, there's not always as many home runs, right? So I talked about the stats that you could be very successful at, even at the youth level. And I just think that these examples just highlight. So go and watch these players hit. They're hitting balls hard, but they're also not going up there worried about the strikeout. So 80-20 baseball coaches, try your best not to talk about strikeouts. Talk about the approach, the plan, the process, and let's not talk about strikeouts. Let's really just try to limit that. And of course, all your coaching is to get players to produce the maximum amount of runs. And inherently that should lead to not striking out 3 times a game, but let's not talk about the strikeouts. Let's talk about the plan of attack, the approach. Let's go on the offense instead of the defense. Hitting is an offensive thing. You're on offense. Stick with the approach. Tell them what to do. And I'm telling you, you're going to have a lot of success, a lot more success doing it that way. It's been a blast being here with you all today, this week. I just love coming here. I love seeing the numbers grow of listeners. Be sure to be here next week. I'm going to splice in a golden message that will help all of us be better coaches, that will guide us all to being better coaches. I'm going to splice this in from a super well-known guy that probably understands leadership as well as anybody out there. We're going to talk about it so you have this to shape your paradigm so you can be a confident, successful coach out there, and really confidence knowing that you have a plan that's going to work. You have an approach that's going to be successful across the board with all your players. So I'll splice that in. Head over to 80-20 Baseball. Get that drill design guide. That's 20+ page drill design guide. It breaks down drills, how to design them. Most drills that I see at youth baseball are good with one of those, 2 of those parts. There's 8 parts to a good drill. You could tie 2 of those together and even say there's 7 parts to a highly effective drill. Do you know all those parts? Get over there. Make sure you know what a good drill looks like. Support the podcast. Minimum just a rating, an honest rating, of course. Put that out there. And email me your success stories as they come about. And also email me any questions you have about the topics we're discussing. And bring up, there's a topic you want me to dive into a little more or a topic we haven't covered. Bring that up. Email me. Shoot that over. Love to hear from you. Until next week, take care of your health. Take care of your families, your close friends. Take this out there. Make the baseball community better. Make yourself better. You're already better because you're here. Now you got to go out there and put it into action. Implement it. Use it. Get after it with some confidence. And this has been Coach Bo. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.